您的金钱，您的保险，您的选择。AIG 美亚保险。
Hi everyone. Today is February 28th, and we are at Senator Susan Lee's office. We have an interview with Senator Susan Lee and Delegate Clarence Lam about the Trust Act. So first of all, thank you for inviting us to your office to talk about the bill. And you might want to talk about the Trust Act first. To the audience.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming down to the General Assembly to talk about a bill which Delegate Lam and I support, as well as the Maryland Legislative Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus. We've joined the Latino and Black caucuses, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish leaders, as well as civil rights, women, and community leaders in supporting the Trust Act, because what the bill does is says that we do not want our police officers to become federal immigration agents, because we need these police officers to be investigating and prosecuting crimes against our community. Things like home invasions, robbery, rape, violent crimes that have been committed against our Chinese community. We also don't want to, delegate this when the federal government can do it itself, because we're going to be diverting very precious resources and funding to having them do federal functions when they can be doing police work to protect our communities, keep our families safe, but also that money could be used for other things like education and other vital social services. So we're just here to say, let's keep, the police protecting us and solving crimes, protecting our Chinese American community, not doing immigration issues, because if they can do immigration work, then they can stop anybody just based on what they look like. And we don't want incidences like, where there was an Indian American woman in Harford County stopped just because she looked what she looked like. She was stopped and asked and detained. They asked her if she was a citizen or not, because scenes like that could escalate into something worse, when someone's stopped, and then they could be detained against, their will. And then who knows what would happen after that. So we don't want racial profiling, and we just want them to be, police to be doing. Over the years, the Chinese community has developed a really great trust and cooperation between our police and our community leaders to work together to solve crimes and to make sure that we get equal justice. And if they're starting to do immigration work, then it may destroy that trust.
And I think we want to be very clear that this bill does two things. One, it'll actually make our community safer, because people that are afraid to call the police or call the fire department because they've either seen a crime or are witnesses to a crime or are a victim of a crime will actually feel comfortable calling the police without the fear that they are going to be deported or detained. So when everyone has trust in law enforcement, it actually is safer for our community. The second point is that when it comes to racial profiling, this bill will prevent racial profiling by restricting the ability of law enforcement to be able to stop people based on their appearance and asking them what is your immigration status or whether you're a citizen or not. We are really concerned about the likelihood that this could happen. I think the senators pointed out examples that have happened here in Maryland where people have been stopped just based on their appearance and asked about their immigration status. So we're well aware that the Asian community is concerned about racial profiling. This bill actually will prevent that from happening and make us safer at the same time.
Yeah, what if you had a situation where your parent takes a walk in the neighborhood and then the police come, or a neighbor maybe may not like you or something, calls the police, and then your elderly father is stop and detain, and maybe he doesn't speak too good English. And then it escalates into a struggle because the father didn't know what they were holding him for. You know, it could lead to a dangerous situation. Such a situation happened in Alabama, I think last year, where there was an Indian grandfather who was just taking a walk in the neighborhood, and the police stopped him. And because he didn't understand English, he didn't know why they were stopping him. He didn't do anything. He didn't struggle. The policeman took him and threw him on the ground and paralyzed him. And so we don't want situations like that happening in Maryland, and where the police can just stop you and based on what you look like and detain you. Particularly if we can't, you know, there's some of our citizens, English is not too good and they don't know why they're getting stopped.
Right. So we know your intention about supporting this bill, but do you know, do you have anticipate any bad side of this bill that will cause some incidents that is not so good?
No, go ahead.
I think there are a lot of myths out there when it comes to the immigrant community and how much they contribute to Maryland. You know, I think there are myths out there that this will increase crime, and we think that that's untrue. That when you look at the actual data and the evidence, you know, having a more diverse community actually reduces crime, and being a more inclusive community, letting people letting them be comfortable reporting things to the police reduces crime. There's also a myth that these individuals will use more resources or use more programs or strain our educational system. We think that's also untrue. There's no evidence that this will be the case. If anything, the diversity of our community will actually build up our educational system. And a lot of these folks, because they may be undocumented, are actually fearful of accessing these services. So they'll probably use these services less than others. There's concerns about that you're compromising the rule of law. We don't think that this is, you know, any issue with the rule of law. The federal government still sets immigration policies. If they want to come in and enforce their federal immigration laws, they are welcome to do so. Our state police and our local police already have enough to do in their communities. They don't need the additional responsibilities of this or an unfunded mandate for them to have to enforce federal immigration policies. So, you know, I think overall there's a lot of myths out there that this bill will cause all these things, and really that's not true.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop the local police from calling ICE to tell them that they got someone who they think, you know, who may be, you know, a violent criminal, because crime's committed by everyone, regardless of whether or not they're immigrant or not, and it doesn't prevent them from working with ICE, because they have worked with ICE in the past. So, you know, as Delegate Lam had said, there's a lot of myths about this that are very untrue, and we just want to clarify that. And because the caucus, the Asian American caucus, would not have gotten behind this if it would have hurt our fast-growing Chinese community. Delegate Lam and I are here to uplift and support any kind of laws or policies that help our community, our Chinese community.
There's a question about, people are more concerned about how the police can determine when to cooperate with ICE and when not to cooperate with ICE if the bill gets passed.
I don't think so. I think they have you know, ICE. The police can contact ICE anytime they want. There's no prohibition against doing that.
And so there's no limitation if there's a criminal offense. So
Right.
if somebody commits a murder, if somebody does human trafficking, if somebody has an assault in a restaurant, those are all criminal offenses. And the law actually, the bill says that if there's a criminal offense arrest, that ICE can be contacted by local police. So there's a lot of myth out there that says that somebody who is a criminal can basically go free and walk out the door. And that's absolutely not true based on how the bill is written. I think there are a lot of folks that haven't read the actual bill, and so we'd encourage them to actually learn about the exact language of the bill, because there are a lot of myths out there, there are a lot of rumors that are going out there that are not based on fact.
Okay, so this the myths and rumors cause the disagreement.
I think so, but you know, we are here to, you know, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And you know, they are against a bill, and they have a right to be against a bill. But we, Delegate Lam and I, and the Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus, believe that this is a good bill to protect our community against racial profiling, but also to keep our community safe. And to continue to have that wonderful cooperation between the police and the Chinese community that have helped solve crimes against us, but also keep our community safe, because we want to be able to confidently call them if we're a victim of crime, for them to come out and protect us. We don't want any impediments to that.
And Senator Lee brings up a very important point, that the full caucus supports this with overwhelming levels of support. And the reason is that when you look at the Asian American community, there are 1.5 million undocumented Asian Americans here in the U.S. And not only that, when you look forward over the next 10 or 20 years, the Asian American population is one of the fastest growing undocumented populations here in the U.S. By sheer numbers, right now everyone thinks about the Latino population, but when you look towards the future, that population is going to be the Asian American population. The statistics are pretty stark, they're pretty surprising for many people. From 2000 to 2011, when you look at the Chinese population, the undocumented Chinese American population has risen by 43% from 2000 to 2011. When you look at the Indian American population, the number of undocumented in the Indian American population from 2000 to 2011 has risen by 94%. When you look at the Korean population, over those 10 years, the Korean American undocumented population has risen by 31%. So, that's why we're really concerned, and that's why we as an entire caucus, whether it's us as Chinese Americans or the Indian Americans that are in the caucus, the Filipino Americans, the Korean Americans, we are all deeply concerned about how this bill can affect our community, and that's why we support this so strongly, because it will help our community in the long run.
So you mean like kind of protect the undocumented immigrants?
Well, I think it protects our community looking forward into the future, right? We have a lot of undocumented Asian Americans here in the U.S. I think a lot of the opponents don't realize that we Asian Americans are the fastest growing undocumented population here. We want to be as inclusive and as diverse as possible, and we want to make sure that our community is welcoming to these individuals, because they do pay taxes, they contribute back to our society, they make Maryland a better state, and so we want to make sure that those who are here contributing to society that are not breaking the law have the opportunity to stay here.
Whether you're illegal or not illegal, some of the policies that Trump has said he's going to support, like making our local police immigration agents, has created a lot of fear and anxiety in the immigrant community, including the Chinese and Asian community, because they don't know what's going to happen. The racial profiling is real, and we don't want this to become an atmosphere of hysteria and hostility, where now they start passing laws against us, like they did a long time ago when they passed the Chinese Exclusionary Acts, when Chinese were specifically excluded from becoming citizens or immigrating to this country legally. And the Chinese that were here during that time, who worked on the railroads and labored in the fields under the most worst hostile conditions, they didn't have any protections of the laws. They lived in the shadows. We don't want that again. And then we also,
the Japanese internment camps.
Yeah, and the Americans of Japanese descent, over 120,000 of them, they were rounded up, put in concentration camps because of their race. What if something happened with China, and then all of a sudden we all became suspects, and we were rounded up, Chinese put in concentration camps too? That could happen with this. I just got to remind you, in 1999, because I was still alive at that time, scientist Dr. Wen-Ho Lee was put in solitary confinement for almost a year, and they never really found any treason against him. And to many Chinese American scientists and to our community leaders, that was just outrageous, that they would charge him with espionage, and it was. I just don't want that sort of thing to happen, and that was just in 1999. So.
And the other concern is to the public, to the external community. They don't distinguish between whether we're Chinese American or Korean American or Filipino, and because we look different, that concern with racial profiling is very real. Just a few days ago, you probably heard about the incident in Kansas where 2 Indian Americans were shot by an individual who came into a restaurant and accused them of being Arab, which was completely not true. But because they look different, just like we look different, those accusations fly at us. And so racial profiling really does occur. It really does harm our community, and that's why this bill is so important, because it will help prevent racial profiling from taking place.
Yeah, I can remember, because I'm old enough, when I was a little girl, that they would hurl racial insults at me and say, "Go home." And I would say, "Go home to where? I live here. I was born in this country." But because, like Delegate Lam said, we look different, we're treated different, and I don't want that kind of atmosphere coming back that existed long ago, but get resurrected, this kind of discrimination against us. Just remember, just about a month ago, I think, a Chinese American grandfather was shot to death in his motor vehicle in Virginia by a security guard, okay? I don't believe he provoked anything. He was just playing Pokemon on his cell phone, and he got shot. And so, I think I hope not, but I think some of the policies of the new president has created an atmosphere of hostility, and I just don't want this to be Maryland to be a state where we have fear, we're driven by fear, anxiety, uncertainty. I want our state to be a state that protects the civil rights of all our citizens. We can live freely, be the best that we can, and that we protect our democratic principles.
So we can see it's kind of like have a misunderstanding between you guys and some people from the Chinese community, and some Chinese people are not very into the politics, and the news that they got is like you guys have like a disagreement last week with some Chinese people who are really into the testimonial against the bill. So what kind of acts do you want to do to resolve this kind of misunderstanding?
Well, it is okay for them to have a different opinion than us, because that's what America's all about. We can respectfully agree to disagree, and that's why we have such a wonderful democracy. And so when I talked to them, we had a little bit of, because I was surprised when I saw them there, because they're Chinese too. And I was surprised that there were other Chinese immigrants were coming here to testify against this bill that would actually protect Chinese. That's why I was surprised, and I said, shouldn't we all be working together as immigrants? Shouldn't we be spreading love? And because we should, just work together. And then we had a little bit of, exchange, but then after we did, because of the loudness, maybe they told us to get out of the room, but then we came right back in. They came back in, and I took them to the Senate room, which only senators are allowed, and we discussed this for about an hour. And they told me they disagreed, and I told them why I thought this bill was good and why the caucus supported it. And then they were able to testify against the bill, which is their right. I think they have every right to testify their position on the bill. It's just that Delegate Lam and I disagreed with their position, and we submitted our testimony for the bill, and they submitted their testimony against the bill, which is fine. It's why America's so great. We can do that.
So, I mean, is this kind of thing will discourage, like Chinese people are not normally want to into the politics, and then this kind of issues will discourage them to go to the testimonial? Or
No, I don't think it should discourage them, because years ago I introduced a bill to fight home invasions. This bill that I introduced made it a new law to prosecute home invasions. And why? Because a lot of the victims of home invasions were Chinese immigrants and other immigrants who may have taken their money and kept them in their house, and the criminals knew that, and they would come and attack them and murder them or rob them. And when we had the hearings, a lot of the people in the Chinese and immigrant community came down to testify in support of the bill. And it made me so proud that and we passed the bill. It was a very difficult bill. There was a lot of opponents to the bill. But because the Chinese immigrants came down and they testified, we got the bill passed. And there was another bill that I introduced that would allow crime victims who could not speak English too well to have court interpreters in court cases in order to help them prosecute the crimes against them. And the immigrant community, the Chinese community, they all came down to testify in support of that bill. And that's the kind of bills that we as a caucus are supporting, bills to help Chinese community, to uplift them, not to divide us, but to work with other immigrant communities to pass a bill like that, so that those Chinese people who couldn't speak English in a court, but they were victims of crime, they could get equal justice. They could prosecute the criminal and then get that criminal off the street so they're not re-victimized again. And in fact, this is a picture of the bill signing. Yes. In fact, there's one of my community leaders who's here to testify in support of the Trust Act. It was one of the supporters of this bill. It was Mr. Vincent Liu, and he's in this picture too. He took time, as well as some of the other Chinese in this bill. They took time to come out of their busy schedule to work for a bill that was going to save probably lives and to prevent our Chinese people from being further victimized. And so this is not all of them, because these were only the Chinese and some of the immigrant people that were able to come to the bill signing. The hearing was huge. The number of Chinese that came for that was huge. There were a lot of Chinese and other Asian and Latino immigrants that came to testify on that bill. And that had the support of our prosecutors too, because they said that the judges were denying court interpreters because of the money issue. But we went down there and we fought and we won. And this is something the Chinese community types of legislation should be working on.
Yes.
And I want to touch on the fact that bills like this really do much good for our community, and our concern is not that folks are getting involved in the democratic process. It's good that they're coming down here to testify and speaking their voice on issues. I think my concern is that we're seeing more and more polarization of people's opinions, and I'll give you an example of that. We have someone here who's going to be testifying later today who's saying that these types of sanctuary bills are actually contributing to terrorist incidents like September 11th. That is absolutely ridiculous. There is no founding to that, but these are the polar extreme views that are being put forth by members of the community, which I think are really not helpful. I think they need to base their testimony and their perspectives on real facts, on evidence. But when they're citing news sources like Breitbart, which is a well-known far right-wing conservative source of information, which I wouldn't even consider to be news, that's a real concern. And they're not only testifying based on that information here, but they're spouting it back and forth to each other within the Chinese community, and I think it's influencing the community in a negative way. So the extremism, the political extremism is not helpful, and the fact that a lot of this testimony is not based on real data, on real news, on real evidence, is concerning because it's influencing people in a negative fashion.
Okay, so right now you're mentioning some people are just waiting outside waiting for the testimonial. Some are Chinese, and they just.
But it's not all Chinese.
Yeah,
It's just some Chinese, and of course, like I said, it's okay to respectfully disagree, and that's what we're here. But we're here with there are some Chinese Americans coming here today to testify for this bill because they know it's going to help the community. They know it's going to protect us and keep us safe, and that's why they're here. And they're basing their testimony on evidence and real facts, and not fear or uncertainty or what they think may happen. They know some of these people probably have been racial profiled themselves, in different ways. Maybe not by the police, but they've been stereotyped and they've been categorized by others because of what they look like, and they don't want this to be a basis for the police to be able to stop them just because they look different than everybody else.
I think some people are just afraid of being unfairly treated, and so they're kind of like very sensitive to some instance. And do you have some suggestions how we can make ourselves like more confident?
Delegate Lam and I asked some of the people that were against this bill to please work with us. We welcome them to work with us, to work on bills to increase education for our schools, so that our kids can excel and be the best that they can, our public schools, and to come down here to save things like adult daycare center, money for adult daycare center for our Chinese senior citizens. Come down here to help our disabled individuals. Come here to make sure we support funding for our senior citizen programs, because a lot of our Chinese population now are aging, and a lot of these senior citizen programs that are funded by, get some assistance from the state, are doing really great things to have a place where our senior citizens can go and do, take tests like high blood pressure, or take diabetes, early diagnosis, or they can go and socialize with their friends and have exercise classes, Tai Chi classes, see movies, Chinese movies together and socialize. It's good for their mental health too. And we have to be a caring community. We have to take care of everybody. And so I would want them, we had asked them to please come down here and work with us on these bills that would help Chinese.
But, and I think our concern is that there are certain elements within the Chinese community that there are individuals who are trying to take a leadership role in organizing people that are intentionally trying to pick some of the most extreme political topics out there, like this one. Senator Lee mentioned many different topics that I think we can agree upon and find areas where we can work and improve these areas for our community. But to intentionally, for people in the community to act as spokesperson and as leaders, to intentionally pick some of the most controversial political topics just to rile up the community, I think is concerning, and I don't think that's the right approach to bringing our community together. As you mentioned, the community is still new, trying to figure out how to best advocate for different policies and positions, but picking the most controversial types of topics when you're still new is not helpful to the community at all.
So what do you think is like the better approach for the Chinese community people?
I think the better approach, since we're a big community, is to pick some of the more inclusive topics so that more people will get involved, so you hear a diversity of voices, so you're not just getting the extremes, and so you'll get more moderate positions where people can come to agreement and come to compromises on. And some of those policies, whether it's education policy, making sure we have good jobs for people, health insurance is important, transportation, because a lot of people are commuting in and out of the Montgomery County and Baltimore areas, is really important for our community as well. And there's a lot of policies that we can do to work on that together.
There's science and technology.
Right.
I know a lot of our Chinese immigrants are involved in like bioscience and IT, because I'm a member of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council, and one of the goals, and I created that council by a law that I passed, and there are a number of prominent Chinese Americans in that council, and we're working to increase opportunities for Chinese owned companies and other owned by others to be able to commercialize their IT or bioscience companies, so they can develop these life-saving medical treatments or modern innovations. They can create jobs, they can create revenues, and they can help the state of Maryland be a knowledge-based economy. And so, because we have a lot of scientists, we should be channeling our energies in the types of legislation and policies that help us economically too. Help us also get state procurement contracts. We need to get our fair share of some of the state contracts too. And Delegate Lam and I have worked very hard on economic development issues too. That's one of our priorities also. But I've always supported science and technology. I'm the former chair of the Nanobiotechnology Task Force, and I'm also now a member of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council, which helps IT scientists.
So as a Asian American, not only like the Senate or delegate, do you guys have anything to say to the Asian community?
I would just say, be up on the issues, read about the issues. Don't just read just the headlines, but find out about the issue in a substantive way about what it really does, and come down here and work with Delegate Lam and I on these issues and legislations that will uplift our Chinese community, help our Chinese, help our children, our families, our elderly, and just improve the quality of our life, but not things that divide us or divide us from other communities too. Because these laws that Delegate Lam and I have passed, we've worked with the other communities to pass it, because we can't do, as an Asian community, you can't just work by yourself. You got to work with like the Latino community, Black community, women's groups, faiths groups, and just by the Stress Act, you can see this great coalition of groups. Where would you ever see a bill being supported like Jewish, Muslim, and Christian all together, and women's groups, and we had Black pastors come down, and the Asian caucus, Latino caucus, Black caucus, and never before have you ever seen such a coalition of groups that would never have worked together on anything, or working together to pass this bill.
And this is, to speak to Senator Lee's point, this is actually the first bill that the Asian American Legislative Caucus has ever endorsed, and we are extremely proud to be able to do that with the Black Caucus, with the Latino Caucus, with so many members of our community, because we recognize how important this piece of legislation is to our community. And so, I'd just like to reemphasize that, to the folks that are watching, that, really, I think you're all doing yourself a service by learning about the bill, by learning about the evidence, learning about the facts that are out there, how this bill will actually function and support our community.
Yes.
Again, just bring back home the point that one, it basically says that the responsibility of immigration laws are the responsibilities of the federal government. It doesn't say that the federal government agents can't enforce federal laws. That's set by the federal government. They have the resources to do it. They can print money. They have a lot more resources than state and local police have. Our state and local police need to focus on our state and local laws, because there's already so much that they need to do. They're already strained. Our budgets are tight. We need them to focus on our local laws. And secondly, when it comes to racial profiling, we all understand what that means, because people look at us differently. And, we need to have laws like this in place to prevent racial profiling from happening, because we know it occurs here in Maryland and so many other places throughout the country where folks just think that you look different, and therefore, feel that they're empowered to be able to ask you what your immigration status is, whether you're a citizen or not. I don't think anyone wants to feel discriminated in that way. And so we all recognize as a community racial profiling is wrong, and so that's why it's important for people to really learn about the provisions of this bill. Those are the two main things that the bill does. And when you explain that to people without the rhetoric or without the heated arguments, without the emotions, just the data and the evidence
hysteria.
And the hysteria, I think people understand what the bill actually does, and will eventually come to understand why it's actually so important for our community, not just now, but as I mentioned with the data that I presented earlier, this is a bill that helps us as a community into the future as well. And so Senator Lee and I are here to make sure that it's not just for our generation, but for our kids and their kids in the
Future
future.
generations who are going to have to live here. We're setting the foundation. And the Chinese that are coming down here, and the Koreans and the other persons are coming down to testify in support of this bill. They actually read the bill. They understand. Otherwise, they wouldn't take time out of their work to come here. And they have never worked with, some of them have never worked with other communities. This is the first time, and I think for the future, we're going to want to continue to do this. But you know what? They made me so proud. They make me proud, and for them to come down here and testify, and for my colleagues to see them here testifying on such a good bill, and they go, wow, this is what the Asian community is testifying on this good bill. That's great. They're becoming politically organized now. And that makes me so proud, because that's why we're both down here, to empower our community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.